What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, aka Smooth as Butter, aka the greatest to ever do it, aka the nastiest to ever step on the mic. Whatever you want to call me, we cover fantasy football on this channel every single day from now all the way up until your fantasy football championships. I know a lot of you guys will be in those because you're subscribed and you're watching the channel. Now, what we're going to get into today is our top 5 must start and must sit running backs. Those are going to be 10 different backfields we're going to be covering today. Let's get straight into this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical.
So first up, we're going to talk about our top 5 must starts at the running back position. First up, we have Darrell Henderson. I thought it was, Sony Michel's season, and obviously it was for 1 week, but Darrell Henderson came out here and established himself as a bell cow. Assuming full health, Darrell Henderson is the bell cow in Los Angeles. He saw an 89% snap share. Sony Michel fumbled. He also saw an 89% share of the short down and distance snaps. This is going to be courtesy of Dwayne McFarland. He does a really cool utilization report on PFF. He does this every single week. So if you hear me, refer to down and distance, 2-minute drill, all that stuff, that's all charted by him on PFF. He's amazing. So now we know Darrell Henderson is in this bell cow type role like he never left, and he has a really good matchup this week in Seattle. It's going to be a hell of a Thursday night game. Seattle versus the Rams. It's going to be like a 54.5 point over under. We're going to have a lot of points. And then the Seahawks also allow the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So Darrell Henderson is kind of set up here to have a really nice game. I like him as like a, he's a fringe RB1 this week. Then we have James Robinson, and I'll take my L on James Robinson. Last week I said to sit him. Of course, he goes out there, went crazy, 78-2 on the ground. Now, I just want to say something, all right? I have a lot of people that comment on the video, oh, well, this didn't age well. Here's the thing, fellas. It is impossible to bat 1,000. It is very hard, these weekly videos, to start sit ones. It's hard to predict what's going to happen in a week. If you play one game out 20 times, you're going to get 20 different results. There is an insane amount of variance. A touchdown could, a guy could go, 15 for 40 and score a touchdown. Wasn't necessarily a great day, but he shouldn't have been sat. A lot of things can happen. But if you're going to come out here, chirp me in my own comment section, make your stand on the day that I post the video or before the game actually happens. Coming out, after the Thursday night game, coming back on Friday, oh, I should have listened to this guy and sat James Robinson. If you told me, you're just as big an idiot as I am if you didn't speak up on the day that I said that. Now, that's just my mini rant for today. And also, I'll be the first one to say that I was wrong. James Robinson should not have been on your bench last week. But here's the thing. I wasn't aware that Carlos Hyde would be a late day inactive. Now, I think Hyde will be back this week, but James Robinson played so well that I think that James Robinson probably earns more touches this week. I think he's going to be, a top 15 type play. They're at home against Tennessee. This isn't really a juicy matchup. It's kind of like neutral. They're about middle of the ground Tennessee in terms of fantasy points against running backs. I just think that he is set up for a good amount of volume after he earned his worth last week. Next, we have a guy that I didn't like a lot during the pre-draft process or, in the offseason when we're talking about, what players we should be targeting or fading. And it's going to be Damien Harris as my 3rd must-start running back of this week. He's going to be in Houston, which is an amazing matchup. Now, I know he only has 10 rushing yards in the last 2 weeks, but I wanted to give you guys the confidence to start Damien Harris. He's a fine RB2 this week. The Texans have given up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. They're minus 8.5 point favorites, so we're going to have that good game script. They're going to beat up on the Texans, after they're going to get that frustration out that they got, from getting whooped by Brady at their own crib. And on top of that, Belichick is running out of room in his doghouse. He has now sent Ramondre Stevenson to the doghouse. I think Damien Harris fumbled. JJ Taylor just fumbled. Everyone's out here fumbling. Damien Harris is probably going to be the main guy this week. So I like him as a pretty firm, back-end RB2. Then we're going to talk about Chase Edmonds. And I keep on talking about this guy in every single video. And it's because his usage has been so great. I can't stress enough. His usage has been insane. I just put out the rest of season rankings. Shameless plug. Check out the patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I just finished the rest of season rankings, and Chase Edmonds, I think, is like my RB16 rest of season in 0.5 PPR. His usage is so juicy. He's 3rd among running backs in target share with 17%. He still hasn't seen a touchdown yet, which is good. He is the RB10 in PPR, and he hasn't even seen a touchdown yet. And the biggest thing is that he hasn't even unlocked his full potential yet. This is a pass catching back, right? So he's at his best when his team is trailing behind in a game or, just in a shootout. The Cardinals haven't really been behind in a game yet where they have a negative game script which means we haven't even really seen what Chase Edmonds, unlocked ceiling looks like when the Cardinals have their back against the wall, a bunch of, long down and distance and 2-minute drill type snaps where they're coming out there down 2 scores and trying to just do whatever they can to come back. That's when we're going to see Chase Edmonds have his crazy game. Now, I'm not going to say that that's going to happen this week against San Francisco, but I still think that his usage has been juicy enough, and he's going to be a top 15, fringe top 15 running back for me this week. Has a fine matchup against San Francisco, who have been giving up the 13th most points to opposing running backs. So I just want to give you guys the vote of confidence that Chase Edmonds needs to be a locked and loaded RB2 for you guys. Then we're going to talk about Chuba Hubbard at home against Philadelphia. And Chuba had a tough week last week. And I know a lot of people are going to be, discouraged, not going to want to play him this week. Only had 9.1 PPR points, but I like him as a back-end RB2 this week. And for a couple of reasons. One being that his usage was fine. It wasn't what we wanted or what we were sold, but it was fine. He saw 15 opportunities. The problem is that Rodney Smith took 92% of the long down and distance snaps, 75% of the 2-minute snaps. So the pass catching work that Hubbard had in that first game, right? So McCaffrey got hurt early. Chuba Hubbard got all of the passing down work, and that's why he was so juicy. The problem is that I guess Rodney Smith was probably a scratch. They're not going to come into a game with 4 backs. So Rodney Smith comes out here in this game. He operated as that passing down back. So what he left Hubbard with is, a 65% opportunity share, not a lot of the passing down work, which is a fine, RB2. Those are RB2 type numbers. And the reason I like him this week is because he has a really nice matchup. The Eagles give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing running backs, and they're the league's biggest run funnel, which means that all of the yards that they've given up this year have skewed to the run. I want to say 74% of their total yards have been rushing yards allowed, which means that whether that's because they get down in games and teams can just kind of sit on their lead and run the ball, or because, their coverage is so great that it lends teams to want to run the ball up the middle, but they're generally a run funnel defense, so they're going to be daring the Carolina Panthers to run the ball. I think Chuba Hubbard will get, something decent, something usable, maybe like 60 yards and a touchdown, something like that. I like him as a back-end RB2 this week. Now, before we get into our must-sit running backs for today, I want to let you guys know that this video is sponsored by Underdog. This video is coming out on Thursday. We have Thursday Night Football, and the best thing you can do with a Thursday Night Football game, especially like this, 54.5 point over-under, Rams, Seahawks, get a little skin in the game on Underdog Fantasy. You can go to their pick'em contest where you can go their over-unders on their receiving yards, rushing yards, fantasy points, all of that good stuff, parlay them together, 3x, 6x your money. So when you hop on there, deposit $10 or more, use my promo code RON when you deposit, you get a $10 bonus. You can throw a nice little $10, put together 3 of the over-unders, go and turn that $10 into $30 and have some fun on Underdog Fantasy. If you want the link to sign up or the link to the app, it'll be in the description. It'll be in the comments down below. So make sure you check that out. Use my promo code RON when you deposit $10 or more for a $10 bonus. Now, moving on to our must-sit running backs, I want to talk about Antonio Gibson at home against the New Orleans Saints. And now I want to say, this is not a must-sit. I'm not saying to go put Antonio Gibson on your bench and go start Michael Carter. This is going to be, I'll probably start doing these must-sits where we'll have a guy at the top where it's just a start with caution, okay? Antonio Gibson is obviously a stud, but instead of being an RB1 this week, he's probably going to be a mid-range RB2 for me in my weekly rankings. The Saints are a tough matchup. They allow the 8th least amount of points to opposing running backs, and they're the 2nd biggest pass funnel in the NFL. So where we have a team like the Eagles that, kind of lend themselves to the run, the Saints are so good up front against the run that teams eventually just start, okay, we're done running. Let's just pass the ball against these guys. It's going to be one of those kinds of matchups. We're going to see Taylor Heineke. I think this is going to be quietly a McKissick game too, where if they can't get the run game going, then we could see McKissick out of the backfield do his thing, especially because Gibson has seen 0% of the long down and distance in the 2-minute snaps in the last 2 weeks, again, via Dwayne McFarland. And the team isn't really expanding his passing down role. So in a spot where they're playing against a pass funnel type team, I think Antonio Gibson is going to have a tough time performing as an RB1 this week. So I'm just saying proceed with caution. Then we have a guy who is a big name as well as like Antonio Gibson, but it's time to fully panic on him. And we're talking about Myles Sanders. He's playing at Carolina, and Myles Sanders is genuinely hovering towards RB3 territory, sitting at the RB33 on the season. He is no longer a guy that you put in your RB2 spot and start with confidence. Carolina is an extremely tough defense on the run, allowing the 4th least points per game to opposing running backs. He has a tough matchup. He hasn't been performing, and he only has 9 rush attempts in the last 2 games. So the Eagles have just been kind of abandoning the run. This is a guy who has had 9 rush attempts in the last 2 weeks. The Eagles have just been abandoning the run when they get down late in games, and we could easily see that here on the road against Carolina. For me, he's an RB3 this week. Next up, we have a full backfield. We have the Dolphins running backs in Tampa, and there's no Dolphins running back that should be started this week for 2 reasons. One being this is a disgusting committee. Just a vile committee that Brian Flores has put together here. Myles Gaskin, the guy that a lot of you guys drafted to be, your RB2, RB1, drafting in the dead zone. He saw 23% of the snaps and had 5 opportunities last week. I couldn't tell you why. Here's the thing. Myles Gaskin, to me, isn't even a bad player. I don't think that he is a bad player. To me, the reason why I faded him in the offseason was because, teams love to just disrespect these late round guys. Unless if you're Arian Foster or like the second coming of Jesus or Aaron Jones, like you have to do so much for your team to put some respect on your name. And they went out there and decided, like they played Malcolm Brown over him. Objectively, say whatever you want about Myles Gaskin. Myles Gaskin is a better football player than Malcolm Brown. But because the coaches have no allegiance to Myles Gaskin, they'll just say, you know what, Myles Gaskin doesn't have the hot hand this game. Screw it. We'll put in Malcolm Brown. And the thing is that I have no clue what to expect moving forward from them. We could even see a Salvin Ahmed week coming up here where he has a 60% snap share. And even then, Malcolm Brown only had 9 opportunities. So none of these guys are startable. The Buccaneers are a brutal run defense as well. That goes without saying. They have those guys up front in Dominican Sue, Jason Pierre-Paul. This is going to be a week where you start none of your Dolphins running backs. Speaking of entire backfields, we're going to talk about the Denver running backs at Pittsburgh. And I think both the Denver running backs are back-end RB3s this week. They play in Pittsburgh, which is the 6th toughest defense against opposing fantasy running backs. And on PFF, they have this metric where they take into account an offensive line versus a defensive line in terms of run and pass, and they have the worst advantage against their opposing defense in the run game. They're going to get absolutely mauled by that front 7 with Hayward and TJ Watt and Ingram, and they just have all kinds of dogs out there. I want to say their linebackers are even really good, Devin Bush. So this is going to be a really tough game for these running backs. They're still splitting touches 50-50, which means that you really only want to be starting them in juicy matchups, and this is a week where you probably want to leave them on your bench unless if you have no other choice. Then last up, we have Ronald Jones at home against Miami. And Ronald Jones needs to be on benches until further notice. And his usage has been really concerning. It all started from that fumble in week 1. I really couldn't tell you guys what happened because I was actually on board with Ronald Jones this year. I was full Leonard Fournette till the day I die. Had him as like a 2nd-round pick 2 years ago. So like 2020 when he got cut to the Buccaneers. When he was on the Jacksonville Jaguars, I thought that he was going to be like a top 12 type running back. This year, I switch up, say, okay, Ronald Jones, I'm with it. I know that he is a really good running back. But in terms of between the tackles, Ronald Jones is really solid. And with no Giovanni Bernard, last week, he could not get on the field for more than 17% of the snaps. He got 6 carries. I know that he got like bailed out by a touchdown, but it's crazy, man. The Ronald Jones dream is pretty much over. Like 17% of snaps with only 2 running backs active is insane. That's like Dare Ogunbowale type usage there. You'd hope for something more like 60-40, 50-50. So I don't care what the matchup is. I don't care if they're playing against Houston. Ronald Jones isn't startable until further notice. Now, that's going to do it for us today, fellas. As always, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. And if you want access to these complete rankings, I'm going to sit down when you guys are seeing this, I'm going to sit down on Thursday, get all these rankings out. I do like my top 50 running backs, top 60 wide receivers, PPR, 0.5 PPR, Superflex rankings, literally everything you could possibly think of for $5. So make sure you check out the Patreon. It's going to be in the description. It's going to be in the comment section down below. Now, as always, I love you guys. Thank you for watching this far. I'm going to go eat some dinner. So I'm going to hop out of here. And I'll see you guys in the next one.
Yup.